Brendan Rogers and Vivian Medrano's Helluva Boss has always been a show with a lot to prove. It has had to prove that its comedy is more sophisticated than random swearing, after an uneven pilot which had a lot of that. It has had to prove that it can do the heavy lifting for the Has-Been Hotel universe as A24 takes their sweet time producing the series proper. It's even had to prove the value of its queer representation to both a faceless mob of Twitter randos and a faceless mob of reactionary kooks. But let's face it, if you need to prove anything to either of those groups, it's either because you have low self-esteem or you're being burned at the stake. If there's one thing Helluva Boss has definitely proven, it's that it's not afraid to be itself. Helluva Boss can be a fast-paced, hyper-violent action comedy while also exploring the intimate emotions of its characters, with episodes like Lululand and Truth Seekers showing that when this show wants to, it can get really deep. Like, I'm talking balls deep, all up in there. And out of the slew of degenerate demons that make up the main ensemble, there's no character that represents the show's ethos more than the Helluva Boss himself, Blitz. Yes, the O is silent. I don't know why, but it is. As my good friend and co-writer Henry Galley pointed out in our Angel Dust video, choosing the right protagonist for a show means figuring out which character best carries the theme, has the most interesting relationships, and has the most compelling reason to grow and change. And in the case of Helluva Boss, that is most certainly Blitz. And from the looks of things, most of my audience would agree that he's fulfilled that role well enough to deserve a standalone analysis video, which is exactly why we're here, to gawk and revel at the emotional complexity of the saddest of sad clowns, Blitz. We'll be covering his role as the founder and manager of Imp, his numerous fractured relationships, and how his struggles have gone from subtext to text over the course of the first 6 episodes. It's worth mentioning that we've analyzed his current and increasingly wholesome relationship with Stolas in another essay on this channel, so if you'd like to hear about Blitz's saucy nights in the Owl House, there's a link to that video in the iCards. We all know by now that Blitz considers his employees at IMP to be like family. He says as much towards the end of the pilot, in what I'd consider the first moment of genuine warmth in the series. In contrast to some of his earlier shenanigans, which included stalking Moxie and Millie outside of work, Blitz comes across momentarily as a somewhat functional leader, whose sentimental side actually brings the team together more than it drives them apart. This doesn't excuse his lack of regard for boundaries, but it does explain where it comes from. Blitz is projecting intimacy onto his relationship with the couple, whereas Moxie simply wants their shared workplace to be professional. Presumably Millie too, but we don't get into her head as much, and that's a whole other video. Regardless, Millie tends to support Moxie's side of the arguments by default, and this leads to another issue for Blitz. Blitz might be the one in charge when it comes to managing the company, but Moxie is often the one who worries more vocally for everyone's well-being. Anyone familiar with American sitcom tropes could tell you that Blitz maps pretty well onto the typical doofus dad, while Moxie's worrywart tendencies place him squarely in the role of the mom. We could get into how Helluva Boss takes the notion of gender essentialism and busts a cap in its skull, but what's more important is that Blitz's notion of IMP as a family doesn't work without Moxie. Blitz can barely hack it as a father figure to Luna, who is a grown adult, a little socially inept, but still clearly independent enough that Blitz's constant interventions in her life is seen as overbearing. Moxie, despite occasional outbursts, is the most even-keeled and logical member of the team, even though his contributions are often ignored. He truly is a sitcom mom. It's almost no wonder that Blitz would want to keep Moxie around for the ego boost. The big imp has got a competitive streak longer than his dick, and having Moxie in the office gives him a verbal sparring partner he never has to worry about losing against. Case in point, Blitz has never once taken any of Moxie's advice throughout the first 6 episodes and is rarely punished for it. Episode 3, Spring Broken, is a clear instance of Moxie trying to apply reason to Blitz's nonsensical plans, only for the show to prove that Blitz was right about his approach to getting clients for the challenge. Of course, Moxie and Millie still have to finish the mission by the book when Blitz gets distracted by his overprotective tendencies towards Luna. Blitz is often rewarded for not listening to Moxie, but Moxie is equally rewarded for taking matters into his own hands when Blitz can't rise to the occasion. That's not an innuendo, by the way. But it is a segue. You see, Blitz has a lot of conflict with other characters in Helluva Boss, and almost all of it is charged with sexual tension. But with Moxie, sex has never been on the table. And that's not because the show shies away from same-sex pairings, far from it. Blitz is pansexual and Moxie is bisexual. But Moxie is also simply in a loving monogamous relationship with Millie. And while that's something that Blitz is implied to have had in the past with Verosika, or might be moving towards with Stolas, the emotional side of things is not his strong suit. His fascination with Moxie's relationship with Millie, as established by his previously mentioned stalking behavior, might stem from a place of jealousy. He wants what they have, or more accurately, he wants them to be having it with him. Getting back to the whole family notion, Blitz kind of has no idea what he's doing. While we can't speculate too much about parts of his past that haven't been revealed, it's implied that Blitz was a performer throughout most of his early life, alongside a sister who is currently in rehab. There's also a line in the pilot about how his father crushed his musical theater dreams, so we get the impression that his solo act as a clown in Lululand was something of a last-ditch attempt to be in the spotlight. Of course, even that hope was dashed when his nearest competition, the robotic Fizzaroli, completely smoked him in popularity and humiliated him to the point that he left showbiz behind altogether. This is the actual reason why he dropped the O sound in his name, and all of you who already left a comment correcting that must feel really silly right now. But what the hell. If you made it this far into the video, leave a comment that explains why the O is silent. Wrong answers only, please. Getting back to the point, it is all but confirmed that Blitz had a less than stellar upbringing, especially when you factor in how much stress child performers are under even with the full support of parents. The fact that he's never mentioned a blood relative in a positive light speaks volumes, and that's without even unpacking this line from episode 1.
Oh, who the fuck is innocent, Moxie? From the moment of birth, you're already a parasite leeching off your mama's kids. Get the fuck over yourself, you baby dick prick!
Putting aside that Blitz may have said this in the heat of the moment, the thrust of that statement was an argument in favor of sniping a married mother of 2 right before her family's eyes, ruining a family in Blitz's own words. Blitz isn't someone with a high regard for family as a concept, but he still wants to treat IMP as a family, probably because it's yet another route to being the center of attention. This is obvious in his strict treatment of Luna during episode 3, where he disregards what she wants and makes the situation about him. He's behaving like how he might describe his own father to act, and unless you have some kind of fear response towards the overprotective dad trope, you'd understand that the writers are giving Blitz these flaws intentionally so that he may overcome them through character development. You know, almost like a story. Funnily enough, Luna is actually one of Blitz's more favorable dynamics in the show, not counting Millie, who barely gets to be a character sometimes, but again, that's a topic for a different video. Outside of his employees and Stolas, every meaningful interaction Blitz has with other characters is adversarial. The one notable exception being Stryker. Blitz bonded with Stryker almost immediately, to the point that he was planning to hire him after seeing his skills in action during the Pain games. Now this is a side of Blitz we hadn't seen up until this point. He's never acknowledged someone as an equal, let alone a fellow imp. His connection with Stolas was founded on a transactional basis to obtain access to the human world, and while Verosika and him were close enough that she had his name tattooed on her body, Blitz put himself first in ways that ultimately corroded their romantic relationship, such as stealing her credit cards for horse riding lessons. Point being, Blitz is not the kind to acknowledge the strengths of others outside of pure utility, even when it comes to demons that are far more powerful than he is. The fact that Stryker was an exception might have less to do with Blitz himself and everything to do with their first exchange.
Not many imps start businesses on their own. That's pretty impressive, sir.
Oh. Yeah?
What Blitz sees in Stryker, besides another capable fighter, is a yes man, someone who will talk up his accomplishments and follow orders without question. Essentially, a taller, equally folksy male Millie. The fact that they are both declared winners in the Pain games rather than a victory for Stryker alone likely influenced Blitz's opinion of him as well. If he and Stryker are truly equals in both physical ability and temperament, then Blitz doesn't have to worry about being upstage, but he also has access to someone with the optimal skills for any job he himself could pull off. It's the ultimate win-win situation for someone who wants top billing, and since he's already the manager of IMP, Blitz can easily cling to that extra bit of superiority if he needs the validation. Ironically, their confrontation at the climax of episode 5 defies those expectations, with Stryker making a compelling case for Blitz to follow his lead. His words get under Blitz's skin in a way no other antagonist has managed to do before this point. Not Fizzaroli, not Verosika, and certainly not these erratic little fartlings. Blitz's sudden realization can be seen on his face. Stryker is roughly the same in stature and skill, but while he's playing for bigger prizes with contracts from nobility, Blitz is stuck running a failing business with a dysfunctional family he can barely hold together. The difference is, well, striking. The added fact that Stryker doesn't even appear to be that upset when Blitz bests him makes it even more obvious. Blitz is holding himself back from his true potential, and he can either try doing things Stryker's way or commit to the harder work of improving his relationship with the people around him, so that together they might accomplish everything he was never able to do alone. That is the prevailing internal conflict that bleeds into the truth serum hallucination sequence of episode 6. Up until now, I've avoided talking about episode 6 for a couple of reasons. The main one is that I wanted to cover the material from the show in mostly chronological order to show how Blitz's character was built up over time. The other reason is that Helluva Boss episode 6 is a show-definingly great episode. Everything in it plays to the strengths of the characters, tone, and world established in the previous episodes, and this is especially true for the way it finally brings Blitz's many insecurities bubbling to the surface, forcing both him and the audience to acknowledge the themes that have been there the whole time.
I simply follow your orders. It isn't my fault if your orders are as nonsensical as a suntanning bed left out on the cold rainy porch of a fresh April shower.
Inside of his molten grease paint nightmare, Blitz is made a clown once again. He's finally back in the spotlight, but not in the role of the entertainer. Instead, he's a perpetual victim of slapstick, an object to be tossed haphazardly through a grotesque pantomime of his life's biggest regrets. Comparisons have been drawn to both the trial sequence of Alan Parker and Gerald Scarf's The Wall, as well as the more contemporary BoJack Horseman, and both of these are apt. The purpose of this scene is to show Blitz reckoning with himself, slowly but surely regaining his true form, and realizing that he needs to change if he ever wants to find the intimacy that he's been keeping from himself. This is the most important scene of episode 6, maybe the entire series up until this point. It conveys so much crucial story information through symbolism and genuinely nails it. What the bad trip versions of Stryker, Fizzaroli, and Verusica represent is straightforward enough, spelling out that Blitz's selfish hunger for attention is the very thing that alienates him from others, with the staircase leading to Stolas appearing as a way out of the endless filth of his past, albeit one that comes with gilded chains. Most notable of all here is Moxie, who transforms from a stylized illustration that Blitz might have drawn himself to a prima donna straight out of musical theater. Moxie is depicted in this moment as more of a lead performer than Blitz was ever able to be in real life, and it's suddenly hints that the Blitz inside of Moxie's Phantom of the Opera hallucination that reconciles with him may in fact have been the real Blitz. It's a little hard to pin down what this choice of outfit really meant, but what is important is that in not seeing Moxie as one of his own drawings, Blitz is acknowledging Moxie's real self, who he is besides a valuable asset to the company. And in doing that, Blitz is that much closer to having a real intimate relationship with another person. In this case, Moxie, the closest thing he has to a friend. Of course, there's no guarantee that Blitz will act any differently immediately after episode 6 of Helluva Boss. Part of the problem with sitcoms is that the lessons don't always stick, and that goes double if one of the main sources of comedy is a character's rude attitude. Still, there's no guarantee that he won't show signs of development in future episodes. After all, this is an indie animation project. Most of the reliance on status quo in sitcoms, especially American ones, comes from the studios, who want to keep the product as consistent as possible for as many television seasons as possible. The reason why Family Guy and The Simpsons are especially guilty of this is that cartoon characters never need to age, meaning that these marketable characters can go on for decades without ever having to risk altering the brand. With everything else that Helluva Boss has done to prove itself, I am willing to believe that this is the start of a proper character arc for Blitz, one that Brendan Rogers, Vivian Medrano, and the rest of the Spindlehorse team are as eager to create as we are to see it unfold. It's obvious from what we've already seen that Blitz is a character written with a lot of passion, and while he's still a wannabe leading man in his own life, he's captured the attention of many fans here in the real world, myself included. At the end of the day, Helluva Boss is an edgy, subversive, groundbreaking show with a hell of a lot to prove, and gun to my head, I can't think of a protagonist more fitting for this kind of show than the broken-hearted clown that is Blitzo. Oh god damn it! I pronounced the O! Shit! Now I gotta do this whole thing over again! Fuck!